Hello, welcome back to a demo video within Rhize. In this video today, I'm going to show you how you can trigger a BPMN based on equipment values. So I'm going to start by adding in some units of measure for my OPCUA tags. In this example, I'm going to use order number as a string that gets changed on an equipment that launches a BPMN. As part of that BPMN, I'm also going to download a recipe set point for temperature. So I'm going to start by adding in the units of measure and then creating a data source that represents my OPCUA server. This could be something like a SCADA or a Kepware. So I'm going to start by creating a data source and turning in the protocol. The connection string isn't mandatory, but it's always good to document it. So after saving that and setting it to active, I'm going to head over here to topics and start adding in my OPCUA tags. We've defined them in Rhize so that when we are binding them, we can use tags that we know exist. So moving along here, I've got my OPCUA tag for line 1 order. You can see that in the description. I'm now going to add another one for line 1 oven temperature, and this one's going to be for the temperature set point. Now that I've added my topics, I can save this version and we can change it to active. Now I've got my units of measure in my data source. Let's create an equipment class that has the functionality that when the order changes, it launches a BPMN. So I'm going to call this pizza line, and I'm going to create some properties within it. I'm going to create an order number property with the unit of measure order number, and then I'm also going to create one for temperature. And then we can go ahead and save this and set it to active. So after that version state is set to active, I'm going to go on the left here to the workflow tab underneath the process list and create a new process. This is going to be a BPMN that is the business logic that gets triggered once my order number changes. So I'm going to call this order start oven temperature recipe set point. So when the order starts, we're going to set the oven temperature. So let's go ahead and automate my BPMN here. After it starts, I'm going to query for the order. And then I'm going to go ahead and check if it exists, because if it doesn't exist, we can simply end. If it does exist, then I want to look up the set point for the oven temperature. I'm going to check if I know it or not. If I know it, then I'm going to download the recipe, or in this case, the oven temperature at that specific point. I'm then going to add in some labels on my connections, as well as my start and end point. So now that I've got my business logic mapped out, I can start configuring all of these boxes. So I'm going to change some of them to service tasks. For this first one, it's going to be a GraphQL query. So in here, I'm going to query for job orders where the ID is going to equal the job order that comes into my process variable context. So I'm going to search for job data, and I'm going to set up this query so that I can parameterize it with a string called ID. And it's going to take job order ID data from the process variable context. And then I'm going to map out this into a variable called existing job order from the first job order that the query returns. I'm then going to give it an English readable name quickly, and the query job order is complete. With that existing job order now, I'm going to add a condition on my exclusive gateway to check if it exists. So now to look up the temperature set point in the next service task, I'm going to use a JSON.transform task. So here we're going to look at the existing job order, and we're actually going to search through the job data and check whether the label is equal to oven temperature. With this, we're going to use its value as the oven temperature set point. If it doesn't exist, we're just going to default back to -1. And I'm going to call this oven temperature set point. I'm also going to give this task a sensible name. All right, with our oven temperature set point, just like before, I'm going to check that it's got a good value. And in this case, not equal to -1. Now I'm going to go ahead and download the recipe. So here I've got to enter in the data source. That's exactly the same data source for my data source page. And then in the data input, I'm going to go ahead and put my OPCUA tags, as well as my JSON.transform for the temperature set point from the process variable context. And then I'm going to go ahead and set this version as active. Now back to that equipment class I was working on, I'm actually going to create a new version called version 2. And this is going to contain the rule that's going to evaluate if the order number changes to call that specific BPMN. I'm going to call this rule download oven temperature on order change. So let's go ahead and select my trigger properties. I'm going to enter a trigger expression as well. On the left, this is just an example input JSON. For my transform expression, because my property has a space in it, I have to quote it. So we've got order number current value is not equal to order number previous value. So I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to add a message payload that is the job order ID, but that gets evaluated once the rule is true. And we can see at the top, I've got the workflow specifications pizza line order start selected. So I'm going to create that rule, and then I'm going to set it to active. Now I'm going to go ahead and associate this equipment class with my pizza line 1. I'll start by saving it as a new version. And then in my equipment class, I'll associate that with the pizza line and save that. Now I'm going to want to bind my properties, but I can't find them until I associated the data source. So I'm going to look in data sources and then link a source. Choose my OPCOA server, confirm. And now the properties, I can actually bind them in my property. So I'm going to associate order number with order number. And you'll notice that the icon changes from red to green. The chain link changes from red to green to say that it's now bound. And like usual, we'll save and set the version state to active. So to wrap up the video, I'm going to navigate back to the BPMN that we mapped out earlier. So when this OPC UA value changes, it will now actually call upon this BPMN. And when it triggers, it's going to query for the order, check if that order exists, look up the temperature set point, and then download the recipe. Thank you.